Welcome back. We are the Brothers Mahoney. This is Michael.
And I'm James.
Today we're discussing the last episode of Season 14/Season 1, if you follow the whole Disney Plus layout, which is Empire of Death.
And we're not talking about that Empire of Death by David Bishop from 2004, which is a novel that was tying the Fifth Doctor and Nyssa. We're talking about Rusty Davies's Empire of Death. Although, fun fact about the novel, which neither my brother or I have read, and in fact we don't own it, but apparently the main enemy, according to the TARDIS wiki, are the creatures on the other side, which isn't very specific.
But it's as specific as it needs to be, I can tell you that much.
I guess we'll see when we get there.
But naturally, this is the follow-up to The Legend of Ruby Sunday. It was released, at least for us, on June 21st, just yesterday, on Disney Plus. The plot, like I said, it follows up on The Legend of Ruby Sunday. And this is, I think, the plot straight from IMDb. The Doctor has lost. His ageless enemy reigns supreme, and the shadows fallen over creation. Nothing can stop the devastation, except, perhaps, one woman. I guess. I added the I guess, because I'm not sure I'd phrase it quite that way, but what else?
I know I would phrase it that way.
Yeah. But I guess before touching on anything, let me just quickly go through the cast. Honestly, it's pretty much the same cast as the last episode, as you can sort of expect, only most of them have much less to do here. Hey, it's Ravi, they're still here. We have the Doctor and Ruby, naturally, Sudi Gatwa and Millie Gibson. Gabriel Wolf voices Sutak, and like James mentioned last discussion, it's the same voice actor of both the Beast from, what was it, Impossible Planet Sentient Pit?
Correct, yes.
And the original Sutak voice actor from way back in Pyramids of Mars time. Susan Tristis here, but she doesn't do much in this episode. Bonnie Langford as Marla's here. She has a little more to do, I guess. Kate's here, played by Jemma Redgrave. Rose Noble is here, played by Yasmin Finney.
And she truly had nothing to do.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just thinking, what the fuck did she even do here?
All of it, the people have been making fun of the fact that literally, basically, the actress showed with her hands on her phone for 2 minutes and got paid. There really is nothing else.
Yeah, Morris Gibbons is back.
And he did stay disintegrated.
Played by Lanny Rush. Yeah, it's so disappointing. And perhaps most interestingly, and I think that still stands true, Anita Dobson as Mrs. Flood. And we'll talk more about that character. And I have to admit, my notes for this, if you could see them, they're quite scattershot. It's all over the place. There's just a lot of small things that I wanted to discuss. But I guess overall impression, it's sort of a common, I don't know if trope's quite the right word, but it's not uncommon for, if this is a two-part story, for the first part to be quite good, at least decently engaged, and then it to sort of fall off the rails. And in part two, and let me give two quick examples. As far as Doctor Who is concerned, the first one that comes to my mind is Under the Lake Before the Flood. Now, I don't think necessarily that the second part, Before the Flood, is that bad, but I certainly don't think it's anywhere near as interesting as Under the Lake is. And for maybe more casual people out there, a really good example is actually the 1990 Stephen King's It miniseries. There's naturally a TV miniseries. A lot of people really like the first part, which focuses on the kids, but then the second part, which focuses on the adults. It's not bad, but it doesn't really have quite the charm as part one did in a lot of people's minds. There's a lot of reasons for that. But I think about that when watching this, because I didn't necessarily love The Legend of Ruby Sunday, but I thought it set up a lot of interesting questions. I thought it set up what could be quite a interesting, I guess, finale conflict in this last episode of this season. And last episode until Christmas?
Yeah, this will be the last one until Christmas.
Yeah, and that one is Joy to the World, right?
I would have to double check, but I'm pretty sure it's Joy to the World, which will be written by Stephen Moffat.
I do remember that. Yeah, so I thought the first part had a lot of interesting things at the end for us to look forward to in this one. I'm not going to go as far as to say this episode dropped the ball.
I will.
I do think it's really overall not quite satisfactory. I'm not sure if you wanted to start any specific place or not, because I was probably just going to sort of bounce around the notes I have.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I almost already talk about this episode for too long because it really did not click with me on almost any level. I see people talk about it, and it worked for some people, and that's fine. It gets to work for some people, but it didn't work for me. And the thing is, I enjoy Doctor Who on the whole, so I don't actually have fun complaining about things I don't like. And this just came out again. Some people liked it, and so I don't really want to, rain in the parade, but it did not work for me. So I guess one of the things I want to start with, and I think it's the most obvious place to start. I thought the explanation, and I'm going to put that in quotation marks, for Ruby's mother was frankly completely unacceptable and not very explanatory. I thought it was completely garbage, basically all of it.
Yeah, the whole mystery behind Ruby's mother has sort of been one of the main mysteries of this season, and it sort of ties into how Ruby becomes Iceman. And just to be clear, on the second part, this episode has nothing to say. At least, okay, let me rephrase. Maybe it did try to say, and I missed it. But as far as I'm aware, nowhere in this episode did they explain how Ruby's mystical or how she has magical, if she has magical, how or why. Because Ruby's mother is just some teenager who got pregnant, had a bad home and dropped her off and pointed at a sign and it didn't make any fucking sense. And I try not to think too hard about this stuff because, like James, I'm a fan of Doctor Who and I don't necessarily like talking negatively about it. But sometimes you just have to. I can't lie about how you feel. I thought it was complete shit. It doesn't make sense. There's a whole mystery behind Ruby's mother, and it's just a normal teenager, so Ruby's not Iceman, so there was no snow, so the doctor's deluded. Is it even a doctor? I don't know. It just doesn't make sense. And the more I think about it, the more annoyed I get.
Yeah, I'm much in the same boat. For me, I've seen some people say, because I usually try to avoid trolling Twitter until after we have our discussions. But considering this was the season finale, and I had strong feelings, I've actually been a bit more active on Twitter than I usually am, under the Brothers Mahoney Twitter thing. And some people are saying, oh, they explained this in our last episode. It was, as the doctor said, that part in time with Ruby's mother was an open wound. And see, here's the thing. And some people are saying, oh, well, maybe Sutak made it snow to make the Doctor and Ruby more invested in who the mother was, so they would solve the mystery because he wanted to know who the mother was. Okay, but here's the thing. And this is a kind of the crux of the matter. They didn't say that. You can speculate all you want. Oh, Sutak cast the snow. Oh, maybe it was the start of the odds of the universe that made reality weak, and because the goblins had just been there and because Sutak was there, it kind of created a whole mixing pool. Maybe all of that as a combination caused it to get mythologized. Maybe not pronouncing it right. Don't care right now. And that would make almost some sense. The thing is, if that was the explanation they had gone with, it would have been my favorite explanation. But I would have said, okay, that's fine. Because if you want to really have Ruby's mother, even after all your setup, just be a normal woman, which apparently Rusty Davies wanted, then you could have done it this way. And it would have, maybe I still would have called the garbage, I don't know. But I feel like I would have been more warm to it because at least it would have used connecting threads that we had seen since we've seen Ruby. It would have used the goblins, who seemed kind of magical. It would have used the start of the odds of the universe. It would have used Sutak. But actually, at least from what I could tell from the explanation they gave, basically none of it came into play. How it came into play was Ruby didn't know who her mother was, and somehow, because it was an open wound in time, I feel like I missed something. I probably did. We have only seen this once. And there are people who say, oh no, this is great. Although I have seen some people say they really like the emotional aspects of Ruby meeting her mother. And Frank, I think I said it last episode, I don't care at all about the emotional aspects because I don't connect to Ruby as a person. I just don't. I'm going to have to re-listen to our Brothers Mahoney things earlier, but I'm pretty sure I said way back when, it seems to me Ruby's entire character is she doesn't know who her mother is. And I guess now that means she has no character because now we know who her mother is. I don't know, like, if you had used the connecting threads of the sound of the odds of the universe, mixed with the goblins, mixed with Stutek's presence, and had even maybe a 13th Doctor thing, which is quickly rattling all of this off in like 10 seconds, and then that counts as explanation, that's still better than what we actually got, honestly. I don't think they explained this really at all, and furthermore, I think, to me anyway, and this might sound mean, but it sounds like Rashid T. Davies was insulting people who were trying to figure it out. Like, oh, you tried really hard to look at all these clues? No, it's just normal mother. Why were you so worried about it? And like, we were worried about it because you gave us the goddamn clues! You had the snow, you had all of these very things that could have been very interesting. It could have been done really well. And you make it just a normal mother who's human, who had sex like, what, at 14? She was 15 when she gave birth. So that's, I guess Ruby was able to escape that fate. Well, I guess at least the pregnant part. I guess technically we don't know, do we? Anyway.
Yeah, I don't know, but it also sort of ties into something that you mentioned, Olin, that some people are making fun of. Why is there like a 15-year-old girl wearing like a hooded cloak and pointing at lampposts? Like,
no, that part actually literally pissed me off. The whole Ruby's emotional, maybe the doctors, I forget exactly who said what when Ruby's crying like, she did name me, my name's Ruby. One, your name is already fucking Ruby. Let's not have any of this, oh, I don't know who I am, 13th Doctor garbage. Your name was already Ruby. You were named Ruby not because your mother pointed at a signpost, which apparently didn't even happen the first time around. We only saw that in the Doctor Space Babies flashback, which apparently was something that didn't happen the first time around. And see, this is why rewatching this season, it's going to be garbage watching it because this overarching plot doesn't actually work. What? So the memory was always that she pointed at the signpost and the Doctor just didn't notice it? And I have to point out, and people have pointed out on Twitter, in the Church and Ruby Road, the Christmas passage that introduced this whole arc, that signpost wasn't even there. There was no goddamn Ruby Road signpost. There was nothing. See, when people saw what they thought was a street light in last episode, I said people were saying, hey, that street light wasn't there before because you know, people watch this show and actually try to figure out clues because they think that it's going to be leading to something and they don't realize they're going to be punished for it. But people were thinking, oh, look, there's a street light there. Maybe that's somebody else's TARDIS. Maybe you're going to see, going back into the time window, that street lamp, and somebody's going to somehow come out of it because it's a TARDIS that actually works. And you know, I didn't see many people talk about that, but hey, that's using clues that you gathered throughout watching the series. But when your answer is, no, she was very dramatically just pointing at a fucking sign, that annoyed me. And furthermore, again, Ruby's thing about how her mother named her. No, her mother didn't name her. She was named Ruby because she was left in Ruby Road, and that's what, I don't know, the vicar or the priests or the whichever religious figures found on the church, that's what they decided to name her, or however that process works. She was not named by her mother. Her mother might have thought, hey, Ruby's a fine name, and she might have pointed out dramatically for no goddamn reason. But no, her mother did not in fact name her, and no, Ruby, your name is still Ruby, and there was always Ruby, and your mother didn't name you, and you're an idiot. But again, I get it, she's emotional. This annoyed the hell out of me. Maybe you can tell that I'm more agitated than usual, but you don't give clues and then mock the audience for trying to figure out the clues that you gave, which is what this feels like.
Yeah, naturally, I feel like most people, myself included, were expecting something a little better from Rashid T. Davies. It just didn't feel like quite up to the standards I was hoping for. And maybe that's a feeling that sort of goes back to even like beginning of the season, Space Babies and stuff, and it was a little bit of a rocky beginning, but things are shaping up quite nicely. And like I said, even though the Legend of Ruby Sunday wasn't exactly amazing, I think it did a decent amount okay. And then this one, I mean, the thing that James has been discussing, this whole thing with Ruby's mother, it's just one small part. Now, it may be the most egregious part. Though I think there's some other big issues with the story too. but it just goes to show that this one just didn't really hit that many notes ideally.
No, and like I said, that works for some people. Some people really get emotional when Ruby meets her mother. Again, I was invested, so I really didn't care. Actually, I was thinking the whole time when the Starbucks person was going to say, hey, do you want your drink or not? Because they have a job to do. And Ruby's just sitting here crying, standing next to another woman, while this guy has coffee that she needs to come grab. I don't know, think about the people who are doing jobs that they probably don't want to do, while you're standing there crying because you found your mother. Again, I'm sure it's an emotional moment for Ruby. I get that. But when you don't get invested in a character, it's hard to care. And in this case, it's hard for me to really care, especially when the plot reveal is, in fact, she's just a normal woman who got pregnant way too early and had an abusive father, and she didn't want the child, she didn't want the father, and she didn't want the child to grow up in that life. Like, I get it, then that's emotional stuff, and I do feel bad for anybody who grew up in a childhood like that. But this whole thing, and this is not the only episode that's done it, but this whole thing about, the most amazing thing, it's not gods or aliens or the stars, it's you as a human being. That trope has always pissed me off, because I've always thought it was garbage. Like, sorry, no, that's... I understand the doctor at some point saying, in all my years of traveling, I've never met somebody unimportant. And I like that, because that's a nice way to look at humanity. But that's a far cry from saying, no, the most amazing thing in existence is the human. Now, again, the Doctor sometimes had things like this. There are even great moments, like the Fourth Doctor in the Ark in Space, saying that the human species was indomitable. That's a nice moment. But he's not saying they're the best thing to ever exist, and they're the most amazing thing, and that it's more amazing than anything. He's just saying that that's really impressive, and I would say in that case it is. But this trope annoys me, and honestly it feels a lot like a Moffat trope. I wonder if Davies was watching to Moffat before he decided to write this one. I don't know.
I think it goes without saying that the mystery or the answer behind Ruby's mother, it just didn't do it. I don't think it makes sense. And I'm not saying there wasn't potentially an emotional scene, Ruby meeting her mother and then the mother coming back to Carla and Cherry's place and they all talk on photographs. And I'm not saying there's not emotional material there, but it just didn't do it for me. Another thing I found, somewhat promising early on, like before I was sort of desensitized, there was, and I forget if we talked about this last episode, we may have, but there was some clear references to 73 yards. And that comes in the form of the perception field there around the TARDIS, which is apparently, I forget, it's like 66 something meters, I forget the exact, but it sort of translates to 73 yards. And there was a reference to that measurement in the previous episode, I think Kate mentioned, I forget how it came up. And some people caught on to that, and it was mentioned again in this one.
Well, I think it was mentioned in the last episode because the camera that had view of Ruby's mother was 66.7 meters away, which is approximately 73 yards.
We also even saw the brief return of Roger Ap Grillem, the Welsh Prime Minister who was somewhat prominent in 73 yards. And I was sort of hoping that this would sort of tie into, perhaps explain some of what 73 yards was. It didn't, but the ideas were there. I guess the groundwork seemed to be somewhat laid down, and I just didn't do anything with it, which, again, personally speaking, major disappointment.
Yeah, see, here's the thing. My brother and I were not the biggest fans of 73 yards because it didn't seem to explain anything. No, people liked it a lot. I think it has the highest ratings of the season on IMDb for all these episodes. Maybe the Legend of Ruby Sandy has higher, I don't know. But people on the whole seem to like it. And people are saying, if you look at it in this context, then maybe... And again, it's our supposition because it wasn't explained. And so they didn't explain that. They didn't explain how she can somehow, as she's dying, go back in time, get her previous self to stop the Doctor from stopping in the fairy circle thing. They didn't explain that. You can like it how you want, that's fine, but they didn't explain it. There was no reasonable indication to Ruby that, I don't know if she was in her 80s or 90s, maybe it's even late 70s, I don't know. But there's no reasonable indication that was going to happen. It just happened, and she kind of just rolled with it. And I'm sorry, but that's not interesting. At least not to me. When I see media, I prefer things that have a logical thought line. I don't like it when things just happen. I see media, when I consume media, I'm seeing it as a universe with internal structures that are generally consistent to whatever that reality is. This is why I actually don't like things like Deadpool, or what Deadpool is nowadays. I don't think Deadpool's always been like this. Because things like meta commentary within the work, literally started by somebody speaking to an audience, that takes me entirely out of the experience. Now, I get that part of that is the writers wanting you to become out of the experience, or maybe making that feeling part of the experience. Again, I talked about how writers like Grant Morrison can do things in this similar vein and make it on the whole work. I've not read all of his works, but the ones I've had, I've quite liked. But he does it quite good as far as other writers do in this. And I just didn't see the logical thought line in 73 Yards. And furthermore, people are now saying, well, maybe Ruby in 73 Yards had a perception filter placed around her because he was a TARDIS. And I don't know what people are saying. I saw some explanation that went through, I think, 12 or 13 different points to explain 73 Yards with what we learned in this episode. But that's the thing. Again, none of that is said in the episode. Now, granted, this would be kind of a hard case to say in an episode because the Doctor didn't experience or have memory of 73 Yards. Except the Doctor somehow sees that Ruby was aware of or knew more than she should of what Roger up Gilliam.
Yeah, God knows I don't know how to pronounce it properly, but that's what I went with.
That's the best I have too. And so the Doctor's curious. Now, granted, I understand the Doctor had some more pressing concerns on his hands, I guess. But you'd think he'd be a bit confused, less concerned that she was in this other timeline. Because she suddenly got concerned when Donna was in other timelines. But in the case of Ruby, that doesn't matter because she's actually not that important. She's just a normal daughter of a normal mother who just makes it snow sometimes. Because I guess that's what normal people do. My best hope, and I don't think it's likely at this point, is that in a future episode, this didn't feel like it was a conclusion to the 73 Yards thing. And I really don't think that if you watch the two episodes back to back, you'll be able to actually piece together what's happening. Maybe you will. Maybe there's a YouTube video being edited right now, piecing scenes from both things back to back and explaining everything in a logically consistent way. Even if there is, even if you can finagle that, it's still not said in the episode, it's still not described in the media we're consuming. It's all outside material of people guessing. And honestly, if this was the amazing reveal that Roger T. Davies wanted in regards to Ruby's mother, I don't know why I'm having any hope that the 73 Yards issue will come up again. As much as I would like something. Because I don't know how I can trust him. He didn't do the obvious thing with the Toymaker, bringing David Tennant's face back. And I say obvious thing. Maybe it would have been strange, and it kind of would have been, but it would have explained more than he wanted to find a home when he had literally had a home with the Paternoster gang as Matt Smith. Just as a bit strong. Point is, he's had multiple homes. He's fine. If he wanted to just stay somewhere, he could. Nothing's actually stopping him. He just doesn't. And I don't think he needs a face, an older face to remind him, oh, maybe I can't just take around with Dana. I didn't really like that explanation. I think this is worse than that one, obviously. But nonetheless, that wasn't any good, and this certainly isn't either.
I do think it's worth, I guess, actually discussing what happens in the episode, at least the beginning. To go into like plus specifics, the episode opens up from, well, naturally with the last one finished off.
Which I have to point out, like I said in the last Brothers Mahoney, Mao pushed the Doctor away, and he's fine. Like I said, I liked everything about the ending except Ruby the Doctor's maybe about to be touched by this person and turned to dust, when he was going to just move. And lo and behold, he just moved.
Yeah, it wasn't the most inspired solution. I don't know how else they would have done it.
Well, I mean, at least when it came to something like, I believe it was the ending of the Science in the Library, Force of the Dead 2 powder, I think River used her queerness gun to make a hole somewhere. And that's maybe not the most interesting thing, but at least it's set up only that she has it. So that's something. But in this one, I guess it sets it up that he'll move because he has legs. I don't know.
Yeah, so that was not exactly that interesting, but it was sort of interesting how it seems like almost immediately after civilization's pretty much destroyed, like Sutak's gift of death is distributed quite fairly and evenly amongst society
He's the true Marxist.
for Snizzle. And there's like storms of sand just sort of wiping over humanity. At first we saw what looked like Kate dying, as far as like characters we actually know, because there's a bunch of characters who died on the street earlier. Like I said, there's a sandstorm coming up, and sort of what you might see in like a generic action movie type thing. And pretty much anyone the sand touches it, they die. So we're already looking at high casualties. Then Kate gets killed, and I'm thinking, you know what, this might really up the stakes. Kate dies. I could see it. Sort of interesting. But then the same thing happens to Carla, Ruby's adopted mother. And I believe the same thing happens to both Mrs. Flood and Cherry. And then I think, I don't know, did we see Rose? Rose was with Kate, right? I can't quite remember.
Yeah, Rose was with Kate at the time.
I don't remember if we actually saw Rose disintegrate or not. I want to say no, but I can't remember. Point being, once I saw how many people got disintegrated, I'm like, oh hey, this is like not going to be the status quo. They're not going to keep this. It's not going to. It's like almost immediately, you know, it's somehow going to be rewritten. So in a way, it almost takes out a lot of the drama. Like it's literally the whole world, all of Earth is pretty much destroyed, and it's not just Earth. It's pretty much every planet the Doctor's been to since Pyramids of Mars, from my understanding.
Actually, it's even worse than that, because one of the dates the Doctor names is 1066, which most people think is a reference to the Time Model, which of course took place before the Pyramids of Mars, so I'm not sure how that would actually be the case. Also, people have been pointing out, oh, I don't know why people are complaining about this. The Pandora opens the Big Bang did the same thing, and at the end of the episode we see the universe get destroyed, so of course we know that it's just going to be fixed. And I'd say there's a bit of a difference. For one, this was the start of an episode, not the climatic ending of an episode. That does change how you feel. If an episode had ended this way, now, granted, if it had ended with Kate getting disintegrated, I might have believed it. I might have said, oh, that's how they're going to do Kate. I mean, I did say at the end of the last Brothers Mahoney we did, maybe Sutak sort of had Mal get killed, because I would have probably believed it, that, oh, this is a companion of the Doctor who is dead because of Sutak. That really raises the stakes. But what doesn't raise stakes is having all those people die in unit, which I could have believed. I could have accepted that. I would have thought it was kind of strange, but I could have accepted that. What I couldn't accept, though, was Carla dying and Mrs. Flood dying and Cherry dying. Because obviously that wasn't ever going to happen. And then, of course, you see how widespread it gets, and it's literally the entire Earth. And then, obviously, at that point, yeah, things are going to be shifted back. I do wonder what people think about in terms of that. Do they remember getting disintegrated?
Yeah,
how much time passed?
Yeah, I was going to say, did Kate say that I forget how she phrased it, but
she had like echoes of...
Yeah, that's what it was.
And okay, so is it a week later? What do the governments of Earth say? What's on the news? See, the thing is, Russell T Davies used to use the news all the time to describe how people and the media and the governments were explaining these alien events. What was her name? Trinity Wiles, the African-American newscaster from CNN, maybe not CNN, but from something. They used the same newscasters, and it gave the world a sense of reality, because that is what would happen. If an alien-like thing happens, it's going to be reported. And I'm not saying this wasn't reported, but we do not know what the normal person experienced. We see Ruby meet up her mother. She's just meeting her in the Starbucks. Everything seems normal. Everybody's going about their normal day. Now, I do believe with capitalism that they'll probably make everybody come into work the day after they were disintegrated. That does sound pretty true. But nonetheless, no signs anyway on the streets. Like, there was nothing. It just looked like a normal day. Did it even happen? Do people even remember? Can they breathe there?
Seems okay.
Galaxy Quest was a good sci-fi. This was not good sci-fi. No, but the thing is, again, doing the whole thing at the beginning of the episode changes the entire tone. No, one of my favorite parts of the episode was, in fact, when Sutak was kind of mocking the Doctor after he realizes all of these places are getting destroyed. And there were a lot of callbacks to Classic Who. We saw small clips and we saw names get mentioned, like Spyrodin and Misaligned, which I believe is the homeworld of the Hoth. Granted, that's not Classic Who. The Ooze Fair got mentioned, though. So, all of these places got mentioned, and that was kind of nice. And I really like the Doctor's emotional moment when he's just crying / yowling when he realizes that he's just been traveling for fun, but Sutak has been using his fan travels to plant seeds. He's apparently planted a Susan Triad mill, whatever you would call these things, in every location the Doctor has arrived in, somehow due to the perception filter of the TARDIS and the 70 yards thing. Now, granted, I really don't know why the Doctor hasn't noticed this Susan Triad character in anything between the Pyramids of Mars and Wild Blue Yonder. I think that's a mighty interesting coincidence that it's been happening all this time, but it's only recently been noticed by the Doctor. I think it's kind of strange. I don't know, maybe it hasn't been happening all this time. It seemed like it had been. He named planets that were in Classic Who. This is another complaint before I get back to the thing I liked about this scene, but do you happen to remember the explanation of why Sutak did this now? Like, why did he take now to strike?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the Doctor asked that same question, and I actually can't remember what the reply was.
I would think that might have actually been in the scene where he was asking multiple questions, and the last question he ended on was, "Why am I still alive?" In which he realized that Sutak was somehow invested in who Ruby's mother was, even though her mother was nothing. But somehow, Sutak wandering, the Doctor wandering, and Ruby wandering somehow made into a mythical figure through no logic that I understand or condone. Out of that aside, I did quite like that scene. The Doctor's emotional, obviously, after realizing that his fan travels. Now, granted, honestly, a lot of them don't seem like they're fan, but we don't see all of them. So, his travels that he was doing just for fun actually led to the death of the entire universe. That's kind of cool, except that he uses it in that one scene, and then he seems fine in the next scene.
Yeah, I have to say, that actually probably was one of my favorite scenes. We've mentioned throughout this season, the studio Gatwa does really well with some emotional material, like Boom comes to mind, Rogue comes to mind, and I think that scene with him screaming into space, I think that was in one of the trailers or something. I remember seeing it before. But that scene, I think, was really good, and it's just unfortunate that the rest of it wasn't as good. I do have to appreciate, I forget what the Doctor called it, but the memory tower just popped up here.
Yeah, no, that was really fascinating. So if you're not aware, there's been this thing in the UK called Tales from the TARDIS or Tales of the TARDIS. I don't remember which acronym it is. But there were 6 of them done. I think it was November of 2023. What the whole thing was is they would get an actor, or actually a couple of actors, who were previously in Doctor Who to reprise their roles, wake up in what they coined a memory TARDIS, a TARDIS formulated of just their memories. And then, oh, by the way, apparently memory is time, and that makes memory time travel or something like that. I don't know. And so there were 6 of these, and they would usually watch them, because what they were these 2 people would wake up in this area, they'd meet each other, they'd have a very nice reunion, they would sit down and chat, then it led into an edited version of a Classic Who story. Now, those might be online, I don't know. But what you can find online are the bookends, which is the beginning and the after of the classic story, which are the companions talking. And it's not always companions. I believe the 5th Doctor meets up with Tegan, Peter Davison. We have the 7th Doctor meet up with Ace. Then we have more fun ones and random ones like Joe meeting up with Clyde to discuss, I don't remember which one they discuss actually, but to discuss something. Of course, Michael actually hasn't seen it, but Joe Grant from the 3rd Doctor era actually did meet and show up in a Sarah Jane Adventures episode where she did meet Clyde. And they actually got the Clyde actor back too. I always think it's fun when they do that. One of the most interesting ones to me personally is Stephen meeting Vicky, same actor / actress from the original First Doctor era, both in their late 70s, early 80s. I don't know where they pulled these people out from, but both of them meeting and discussing things that happened to them after they left the Doctor. Vicky apparently left in the Mythmakers. And who knows this? Who cares? And yet, they got these same actors and the same actress and they brought them back. And that's great. I love that so much that they actually did that. I think that's so respectful to the 60 plus years of Doctor Who. And so, I guess they had this memory tower just sat lying around, and Rasa wanted to use it. So he brings it into the mainline show, which is honestly very fascinating. He probably did have that planned.
Yeah, the memory TARDIS aside, which I think was nice to see. And that scene, that scene with the Doctor screaming into space, again, great to see. The episode had sort of almost a jumbled feel to it, because once Earth is destroyed, and like I said, at that point we know that time's going to be rewritten, so it's almost at that point like, who cares? Then the Doctor is with Mal and Ruby in the memory TARDIS. Then, maybe 2 weeks later, he's on some barren planet, gets a spoon from a woman, kills the woman's baby and leaves. It doesn't happen that way. Actually, I think that scene is sort of interesting too. This woman somehow survived the death course, but it's passed on from children to... I actually didn't entirely understand it, but I thought the scene was sort of nice.
It was something along the lines of what Sutak was doing not only caused death to the people who were dusted, as it were, but if it killed a son or daughter, it would somehow go up to the generations. So it would kill their parents as well to kill everybody out throughout time. I also didn't quite understand, admittedly, how Earth in the 1960s get dusted and Earth in the 1970s get dusted and Earth in the 70s and 80s for UNIT get dusted. I mean, once Earth gets dusted in the 60s, you don't need to dust it again in the 80s. But I guess that's a whole time travel thing which I've never quite gotten because it doesn't make any actual sense. But, nevertheless, so that's kind of what was going on there. And I guess it doesn't work in reverse, or maybe Ruby's just inherently resistant to it because he's either in a memory TARDIS or Sutak didn't want her dead because he wanted to know who Ruby's mother was. But I mean, a lot of people really, really liked that scene, and it was okay. Although, he got a spoon from the woman. I know he said he needed something that was quote unquote real, and I guess the explanation is that because if they were in a memory TARDIS, everything in the TARDIS was kind of existing by mere memory or mere thinking of it. So he needed something real, and he also had no control over this thing. This isn't a quote unquote real TARDIS. It's very weak power. So he needed something that's real, and I suppose the planet he goes to is one that he hasn't visited before and hasn't been completely touched by the death dust from Sutak. And it just happens to be the one random planet he lands on that also happens to randomly have somebody alive who also randomly has some metal that he can give the Doctor that he's able to use. Now you would think, let's say the woman is dead, he could have just found a spoon. It didn't need to be some dramatic, the woman gives it to him because he has a nice face. Like, you can like the scene all you want, but just that, honestly, I didn't get the emotional point of it. Like, people were saying, oh, it's so sad that she forgot her child had died. And I'm like, yes, that's sad. But, again, like, I don't know, it didn't connect with me. It was an okay scene, but it didn't connect with me in any actual way.
Based on the rest of the episode, it's not really surprising. And I also think it's pretty fair to say, and I think James said this at some point, he may have written it on Twitter after we watched it, but it seemed that they didn't necessarily do justice to Sutak. Like, Sutak is among one of the most powerful entities the Doctor's faced. And granted, it's been a while since I've seen Pyramids of Mars, but it was a big deal. And that's why many people, I would say, were quite excited to see Sutak returning. And I'm just not quite sure this really made this. I guess you could argue it made it epic. I mean, he literally wiped out the universe, I guess. It just doesn't feel particularly epic the way they portrayed it. And I was sort of hoping for, I don't know, it seemed like they didn't do as much with Sutak as I was sort of hoping they would.
No, and maybe we were always going to be disappointed because at the end of the day, Sutak is so powerful. You have to remember, if you've seen Pyramids of Mars, Shutak was able to do everything he did literally while he was imprisoned and couldn't move. That's how powerful he was. You should see some of the things he said in the episode, and actually there's a reference to that. His whole little "I find that gold" reference that I thought was actually kind of funny. And furthermore, the doctor replying much the same way that Tom Baker replied, calling him, like, I don't know, abominable or something to that nature. So maybe we're always going to be disappointed, because what can we do with him at full power, and how could the doctor possibly stop him? This one, it did the whole, he brought death to death, which caused life. And yes, you can make that a mathematical formula where, death and death, that cancels each other out. So then that's life. But that's on a piece of paper. In actual existence, like, okay, let's say he brings death to death. Does that mean everybody in all of existence is now not dead? Well, that's obviously not the case. So what, just conveniently, everybody who was in existence, but only in 2024, they came back? How about if you would have naturally died right when the dust went off, Sutak's dust, and then let's say it was 2 weeks later? It seemed like there was some type of time jump. We don't know how long. So let's say it was 2 weeks later. Would you have come back? How about if you died in between the 2 weeks? Would have naturally died in between the 2 weeks? Is that a get out of jail free card when you die, when you get undusted? Death to death equals life. Seems like one of those things Jackass college student would say and feel like they're all smart about. It doesn't, to me, I can't put it into actual reality and actual existence. It sounds like just some philosophical bullshit.
Yeah, and it just didn't seem right. He's pulling Sutak sort of through space and time with this magic rope. It sort of ties into the magic glove he had back in Church and Ruby Road. And I don't know, Sutak just doesn't seem nearly as powerful as you would sort of expect, which, like James said, anytime they bring back an entity this powerful, you'll probably be disappointed with how they deal with it. But this just seemed particularly sort of weak to me. Like, I'm not a writer, I'm not sure how I would have approached the issue. But especially, though, with Russell T. Davies having as many credentials as he does with Doctor Who, I would have expected something more. In a way, that's almost like the theme of this.
Yeah, see, what you do to at least do something with Sutak is have someone actually die who is important. Maybe have Cherry Sunday die. Maybe have Homado die. Maybe have Ruby meet Homado, but then she dies. I don't know, have somebody die. Sutak appeared, the god of death, had an amazing reveal at the end of last episode, and no one died. I think it was such a mistreatment of not only the character of Sutak, but of Gabriel Wolf that they brought him back for this. Furthermore, it's one of those things, and people talk about this in terms of other things. I forget what media it is, and it's not coming to mind. But you can only do this once. They can't have a dramatic Sutak return next season and actually have it mean something. No, this was the dramatic Sutak return, and this is all it's going to be. They can't do this again. So, I haven't listened to it, but go listen to Beneath Summerfield, the one with Sutak that we mentioned last time. Because I'm sure what happens in that one is better than this one. And it treats Sutak with more respect.
Yeah, and when you put it in terms like that, it's even more sort of depressing. Because I don't want to say people are hoping for Sutak to return for decades, because that's probably not quite true. But when a lot of people were talking about Sutak's potential return, I know a lot of people were excited, and it just doesn't seem... Well, I guess like James said, some people really liked the episode, but like personally speaking, it just didn't do that much for me. There's one positive thing I want to talk about, but before I touch on that, I want to talk about one thing that's perhaps not a negative, but just an expectation I personally had that wasn't really resolved. I sort of expected Susan, naturally the doctor's granddaughter, to show up here, primarily because she was mentioned in both the Davies Code, she was mentioned naturally in the first part of this story, and I sort of expected she would have something to do with this. I at one point even suspected perhaps Mrs. Flood was Susan, but before watching this one, I realized that's probably not the case. But I said I sort of expected Susan to appear, and she didn't, which it's fine. I'm not sure her being in this would have done justice to her, so in a way I'm almost happy she didn't. But I was sort of hoping that she would, and I'm now hoping that she pops up in Joy to the World. It might make sense for her to appear in like a Christmas special, especially after how this episode ended. Which, actually, let me talk about the ending for a brief second. Ruby's connected back with her real mother. Her real mother's looking through photographs with Cherry and Kaola. It's all happy. The doctor doesn't really want to get, I guess, too involved. He's like, he has his own issues, I guess. He, in fact, encouraged Ruby to not go actually meet her real mother, which was sort of interesting.
And kind of funny.
Yeah.
It's partially strange with this doctor.
Yeah, you'd think this doctor would be all about like the emotional, I don't know, just trying to deal with your emotional health, and maybe that would be the best thing Ruby could do. I don't know. So I guess maybe the doctor's going through his own things, but he's saying goodbye. It seems like he's saying goodbye to Ruby. It just seems sort of an awkward conversation because it's my understanding, maybe my understanding's wrong. It's my understanding that Ruby is still going to be in this upcoming season. And like I said, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm thinking of old information that's been overwritten by now. I don't know. But it seemed like he was literally saying goodbye to Ruby. It seemed like they were almost done with Ruby, which would be a shame, by the way. Because even though Millie Gibson hasn't had like a ton to do this series, I do quite like some aspects of her. I think she has really good facial expressions, which might be a small thing. Because you could say the same thing about Claire. But I really like some of Millie Gibson's facial expressions throughout the season.
Yeah, no, her facial expressions were one of my favorite things about her, actually.
Yeah, okay. It would be disappointing, but it really did seem to me like they were saying, hey, goodbye, Ruby, you made me a better person. I'm like, wait, is she coming back? It just seems strange to me. And it's entirely possible she wouldn't be in Joy to the World. It might just be Gatwa with, fingers crossed, Susan, Caroline Ford. I would love that. I think it'd be really fascinating. Sort of like in between seasons, just going with another companion, well, in this case, Susan, who's been the companion before. I think that'd be sort of interesting. And now, like I said, I'm sort of hoping that's what Joy to the World is.
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea, especially after this episode. He sees, of course, Ruby connect with her real mother. Maybe that will convince the doctor to finally reconnect with Susan. Now, I am admittedly very tired of Rusty Davies doing what he's done with the Toymaker and now what he's done with Stu Tuck to basically decanonize their appearances in other media. Especially for Toymaker, there's really no reason for that.
Though I do think a good point could be made with the Toymaker's line, how he made a jakes out of the Doctor's history. So the way I see that is pretty much now everything is officially canon, and it's just all messed up because of the Toymaker. So I think it still works.
I suppose that's fair. That's fine then.
That's all right.
All you need is a line to explain something, even if it's bullshit, and I'm better with it. Proof and point that.
Yeah, James is not always a naturally bitter creature. He sometimes does have joy in his life.
And maybe I'll have joy when Sudi Gatwa meets Caroline Ford.
Yeah,
and they reconnect.
Yeah, and keep in mind, this upcoming episode is written by Stephen Moffat. So if you have been disappointed with Russell Davies, even if you're not really a John Moffat fan, at least you can take a step away from RTD, and maybe this next episode will be something, I don't know, quite nice. I mean, the Christmas passages have been sort of hit and miss. I would argue Last Christmas and A Christmas Carol and aspects of Thrice Upon a Time. That might be below the line, but aspects might have been okay. But point being, this next one has the potential to be quite nice, especially if they bring back and do justice to Susan. So I am looking forward to that if that's the way it goes. Other than that, the one thing I did sort of like about this episode, and that would be Mrs. Flood. And the reason I sort of liked it, it hasn't been ruined yet. Like, it's possible that they might explain it and it makes it really shit. I don't know. But they never actually answered anything with Mrs. Flood, so it hasn't been ruined yet. So the mystery is still there. Who she is, what she knows, how she knows it, why she's talking to me like she knows me. And she does address the audience at the end of this episode, which is, I don't know, it was sort of playful. I forget the exact line, like, oh, the doctor's in for a bad time coming up or something like that. It was sort of goofy, but I sort of liked it.
Yeah, no, she had this very snazzy winter coat on. Looked very expensive. And she was saying, well, Ruby's story ends happily, but the doctor's story will end in pain and terror.
Yeah.
Good night.
She's a drama queen. I love her. She actually is my Yash queen now.
Some people have actually jokingly said, knowing Rhapsody Davies and his solutions to mysteries, maybe should just be an old woman with dementia who thinks she's talking to somebody, but there's nobody there. But no, Mrs. Flood is also, I mean, I said this last time, that she's the thing I'm most interested in, And I suspected, and I was proven right, that they would actually explain that aspect. I kind of thought maybe they would save over season 2. Now, obviously, if they're saving over season 2, that means we will see more Ruby. I'm not saying she's going to be a constant companion, but I think she's going to be around because Mrs. Flood, if she shows up, just happens to be her neighbor. So I think it's pretty safe to say that we'll see Ruby. I think that's going to happen. And by the way, Michael and I do not tend to look at discussions in terms of production. We usually just kind of watch the story as it comes. We find it less poorly that way and actually more fun on the whole. I mean, we might see the tidbit now and then, but on the whole, we don't look for that stuff. So, Mrs. Flood, when she was dying with Cherry, before, of course, history got rewritten, had this line to Cherry because she told Cherry, hey, we're probably both about to die. I forget exactly how she phrases it. Then she asks Cherry if she believes in God, and says, oh, of course I do, which, I don't know, maybe she shouldn't, but whatever. Then Mrs. Flood says this, and the fact that they have this line, and then they just have us waiting it for at least 6 months. Let's be real, she's almost certainly not going to show up in this Christmas parcel. So really more like 10 months, if not maybe a whole year. And so we just have to sit in this, but tell your maker I will come to storm down the gates of God and seize his kingdom in my true name. And then right as she's getting dusted, she said that she had such plans, and then she disintegrates. And that's one extremely cool, extremely enticing, it's a really cool thing to say. But now you just have to wonder, is it going to be followed up in a satisfactory way? Is there going to be a satisfactory answer or a recognition even of the fourth wall breaks, which have been bugging me all season? Because this, again, I look at Source as their own contained universe, and people did not break the fourth wall in Classic Who or in early and New Who. That didn't happen, and yet we've had the Doctor wink to the camera. We've had Mrs. Flood at least 3 times now talk directly to, I'm going to say the audience. Maybe she's speaking to some alien species that she's giving a report to. That doesn't seem very likely, but I don't know. And I would like a recognition of that. People say, oh, it's fun, it doesn't need an answer. Yes, it fucking does! If that doesn't get an answer or recognition, to me that's abhorrent. You don't just do that. So, again, I now have to trust that RTD is going to actually not only answer Mrs. Flood, but also answer the fourth wall breaks. And as interested as I am in Mrs. Flood, and as much as I've enjoyed the actress who plays her, I don't know if I can trust him to actually follow through with a good answer to that.
But I do think, and I've thought this almost from the very beginning, that Mrs. Flood has the potential to be one of the most interesting mysteries. I mean, I was interested in the whole Susan Trist thing too, and I didn't really have a problem with it. Though I still don't, like James mentioned, I don't see how the Time Mardler story, which took place before Pyramid of Mars, I like James explained earlier, I'm not going to touch on it. I'm annoyed enough. But point being, they still have a chance to do justice with Mrs. Flood. And I don't know if it's going to go like on and off throughout next season too. I'm not sure how they expect or when they expect to address it. But I do think it still has potential.
Yeah, one of my biggest hopes for this upcoming season is that it's done justice to Mrs. Flood and that we get a cool, logical answer. You can use the magic, use the salt. You wrote this, Russell. You can use it. Have the doctor say, it must be because of the start of the odds of the unit. Like, have that instead of us needing to guess and make pretzels of logic that doesn't seem to exist. Use your own connective thread that you created. It's not how. At least it should it be.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if that positive is enough to really lift up the episode that much. Generally speaking, I don't want to say this was a necessarily exceptionally weak episode, but it's very, very, to me, lukewarm. I wasn't satisfied with a lot of it, and there were some cool elements, but overall, it's like an overall experience. I mean, it's not as bad as Space Babies, but I was really hoping for something a bit more. That's really all I can say. It just didn't really do as much as I was hoping it would.
And I am much in the same vein of that. The answers we did get, like the Susan Trist thing was fun. I suppose that answers what was going on there. But the use of Sutak was frankly a disgrace. And the answers to Ruby's mother was worse than a disgrace, at least to me. Some people really liked it. I don't know how, but some people did. And you get to like it. You're no more of a fan of Doctor Who than I am, and vice versa, you're no less of a fan. We just like different aspects of Doctor Who. And that's fine. There's a 60-year history. You don't need to like everything. Yeah, this episode, I mean, again, you can probably tell throughout this, it annoyed me. On the whole, it just bothered me. It didn't answer anything with any satisfying way. I mean, that's, to me, disappointing. But there's always more Doctor Who. After this, it's going to be, 6 months till Christmas? Actually, almost exactly 6 months until the next episode. And during the 6 months, we'll finish off Christopher Eccleston, we'll talk about some Ollie David Tennant, we'll talk probably about some audios, we'll probably talk about some random comic strips for fun. Because again, there's a huge history of Doctor Who. But yeah, this episode, Margot was talking earlier about two powders and how they sometimes don't have great endings. And people have even said Davies is very good at writing endings, specifically him. And on the whole, I actually tended to like most of his season finales for his first 4 seasons and this past the end of time. They're not all great, but I think they all work. I think every single one of them easily beats out this one. There's not even a question. I haven't seen, most people would probably say haven't seen how banned now that I think about it, but that was Rhapsody Davies. But I haven't seen the two powder with part 1 being so good and part 1 being so bad. At least, again, to me. And I don't know how long. It was, again, I didn't even laugh part 1, but the ending section with the reveal of Sutak sold me. And maybe I should have asked for more money. But the follow-through was not all that for me. I do think this season, honestly, is going to not be great in rewatches. Because once you realize the mystery is that there is no mystery and why you're wondering about her mother, why was the maestro so concerned or worried about Ruby or the song in Ruby? Was the song in Ruby just a personification of Ruby? She really didn't know who her mother was? That Marie and Space Babies, did it actually change? Did she always point? According to Rhapsody Davies, unless all of this is a cop-out, and if it is, that's also, frankly, really, really weak writing. But unless all of this is a cop-out, the answer is, fuck you, you don't get to know. Or even worse, why are you asking? That's what it feels like. So yeah, this episode and the things it revealed were not good, in my opinion. I think on IMDb I rated this a 3 or a 2. And right now actually has a 7.1. There's a lot of 10s, 9s, 8s, and 7s. And yet on Twitter, I see a lot, I'm seeing some positive things too. But I'm seeing a lot of people saying, if not outright bad, at least mediocre. That seems to be, on the whole, my impressions of the general consensus. But, Michael, we do actually have a poll going on our Brothers Mahoney, you know?
Yeah, that's a good point. And James made the poll. What was it? Are you satisfied with the answer behind Ruby's mother?
Correct. In a completely non-biased way. And I almost put explanation in quotation marks. But I stopped myself. And I just asked simply, are you satisfied with the explanation? And people have the option of yes, no. What was the third one? Resolving judgment. Because maybe something will come up later. We've already had, I think it's 27 or so responses. So for us, that's pretty good, since we don't have all that many followers.
Yeah, and it's not surprising, at least it's not surprising to me, that if I recall, I think it was around like a 60-40 split, something like that.
Yeah, right now, 17.9% of people voted yes, 67.9% voted no, and 14.3% people are resolving their judgment, and that's with 28 votes right now.
Yeah, and that's not really surprising to me. I guess I'll just finish off by saying what I've said throughout. I was just expecting a bit more than what we got here. It's disappointing to me. I'm not sure if I'm like 100% surprised, because maybe it's just going to be a hard road to tow, but it just wasn't what I was hoping for. I think it's fair to say that James primarily feels the same way.
Yeah, no, again, the thing that depresses me most is the Sutak thing. I hope, since obviously he was willing to come back to the show, maybe they can grab him for something in Big Finish. Because again, he's 91. And he has done Big Finish things before. Like I said, he did it with New Summerfield 1. he did actually some things with the Fourth Doctor as well. So he has done big finish things before. Maybe they can grab him one more time.
But yeah, as always, that's just our thoughts on this. And this one, I'm not sure if divisive is going to be the right word. But like James said, he's seen some positive comments about it. I haven't really been on Twitter since this episode because I didn't really want to, I guess, quote unquote, dilute or pollute my own thoughts. So I'm not quite sure what the general consensus is. I'm actually surprised if it's really as positive as James has been saying that some of it is. Because I guess it just surprised me. But that's fine. People like what they like. But if you have differing thoughts on this, please let us know. You can comment either on Twitter or down below here on YouTube. But yeah, as always, this has been Michael.
And I've been James.
And you've been listening to the Brothers Mahoney. Thanks very much, and we hope you all have a nice day.
And enjoy the break from now until Christmas. And join us for all the random stuff we talk about in between.
If you sort of lost your interest of Doctor Who because this finale didn't do it for you, keep your ears tuned to the grinding gears. See you then.